Hi there. This is Billy Tarasio from the Modern Divorce Podcast, and today's guest is going to be a little bit different because up until now we've really talked to divorce professionals or mental health professionals and attorneys, and now I've got one of my good friends, an estate planning attorney, Rylas Dana, here with me. But Rylas is not only an estate planning attorney who's local, he is also a divorced dad. And so he's going to give us his perspective on modern parenting post divorce. Rylas, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and I like the intro that we're doing it different. Today's show is going to be a little bit different, so that's good. I'm glad we can start off that way.
Absolutely. Let's mix it up a little bit. So, the reason I had first asked you to come on is because people are asking me all the time. um, I'm a divorced parent. I have custody of my kids. What happens to me if I die? How do I make sure that my children do not end up, with my ex full time because my ex is not a good guy or because I'm really worried about it or et cetera, et cetera. Now, Rylas, what can people do?
I love it. So I get that question too. From they meet with someone like you a lot of times. You'll get in divorce, and you'll say, I'm talk to an estate planning attorney, or sometimes they start with me. So I get a lot of calls as well from a lot of my friends and clients, and I'm one of the first to know sometimes, that they're going to get divorced, and they say, what do I need to do?
Mm-hmm.
So good. So here's what you need to do. So step one, I'm glad I have some props here: paper, pen. I think the
Mm-hmm.
easiest way to change it is to do a holographic will. That means handwritten. So once you file, and you can help me on this, this area better, but once you file for divorce, that cancels everything. Is that true? That cancels,
Right.
I mean, like your estate planning contracts and the beneficiary designations and your life insurance and retirement accounts.
Well, I think that that's true for your will. There's a presumption under Arizona law that your will is revoked upon filing for divorce. But your beneficiaries, that's a contract. So your IRA beneficiaries, your life insurance beneficiaries, those are still in place unless you change them.
Yeah, or unless the contract says otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that I didn't think about those as well, because they may not say that. And if they're in another state, now is this part of the rule as well? Does you have to file for divorce, and it also has to end in divorce, right? So if you file and don't complete the divorce, or am I
Yes.
getting mixed up between California?
You're not. So there's a couple issues, right? So as soon as we file for divorce, then there's a presumption that the will is revoked. But if someone dies pending a divorce, which has happened several times in our office, and is a bigger risk now because of the coronavirus than it really ever has been, uh, at that point, your will that was in place is still in place. So your spouse is set to inherit most of the time. And under the intestate rules, this is still your spouse. So if you don't have a will in place and you die pending a divorce, your property is going to transfer to your spouse or your soon to be ex-spouse.
Yeah, so when I get that call from my friends, from my clients, what do I do? I say, get out, do you have a piece of paper and a pen? Here's what you can do right now. You can do a handwritten will, and then come see me and we can finalize it later. Or oftentimes you have to wait for the divorce to finalize. So, but we can get started by creating a new single trust. And then after the divorce is complete, they put their assets in their new trust.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because you can't start moving assets around. Right? You
Right.
can't.
So when you file for divorce, a preliminary injunction goes into place that says essentially that makes you stop certain things. Now, that means you can't take somebody off your health insurance. You can't change insurance beneficiary designations. You really have to do that before you file for divorce. But what you can do is you can update your healthcare power of attorney, your living will, your advance directive.
Yeah. So I say that the easiest way, just with a piece of paper, you could say, I revoke, all gifts, contracts, made to this person, date it and sign it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
So
that
then,
that way you have a new last will and testament. So the
mm-hmm.
scenario that you described, if someone passes away during the divorce, now there's a will in play,
Right.
and and then at least that's something else for those other contracts. But I think you're gonna have to go contact those places, right? You want to contact, depending on what it is. I don't know if you can change your retirement accounts. A lot of times they want spousal consent.
Right. And the preliminary injunction stops you from doing that. So we've got two issues. We've got the money issues, and then we've got the kid issues. And so the question that I want to talk to you about today is, this is post divorce. Post divorce, we're 3, 4, 5, 6 years out after divorce. Um, and you've got a custody agreement in place. Let's say it's 50-50 or whatever it might be. If you die, can you name a guardian for your children during your parenting time? Or do your children automatically become, uh, go immediately to your ex-spouse or their other parent immediately upon one parent's death?
Ooh, I love this question. I'll tell you what I tell people, but I want to ask you, because again, you deal with this more. I'd say in the family law area. So here's what I tell people. So in the last will and testament, you can name a guardian, and what I tell people is, yeah, you can name who the guardian is, but if they're, the other parent, if they have some custody already, if they have any amount of custody, even if it's like 10%, 5%, it's my guess that the court is first going to go to them, as the parent to take over, kind of the rest of the custody. And I tell people you can say what you want to have happen, but just understand it's probably going to go to that other parent. Am I close? What do you think? Like, how does it work?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. Um, Parents are, when you die, the legal parents will have all rights of custody and parenting time. Your legal custody rights and parenting time rights are gone if you pass, and they cannot be passed on to someone else that you name as guardian. But I think by setting up that will and testament and by naming that guardian and by maybe laying out why it's so important that you are giving guardianship to this person, you can help influence if those people want to come get visitation rights after you've passed. And then the other thing you can do is, of course, you can protect your children financially, because even if the other spouse is getting, even if the other parent gets 100% custody of your kids, all of that money that you've left to your kids, you don't necessarily want to be managed by the other parent.
Right. So that's the easy part, is the money, and we can definitely separate the money. So I tell them on the guardian side, if they have some amount of custody, probably not, but we can definitely take care of your money. Decide who's going to manage it on behalf of the kids.
And then if you have a situation where one parent is not involved at all, that's when parents are really concerned about passing away and having their children go live with this other person that they don't know, that they don't have a relationship with. And at that point, I think it's more important than ever to name a guardian and to equip that guardian with the information they need on how they can become the custodial figures to the children if the parent passes.
Yeah. So in a case where one parent has zero custody, um, and if the other person with 100% passes away, if that other parent came forward, they would probably give them the custody. Is that true? If they say, you know what, long lost, father or mother, it could be, I want to be involved, my kids now.
Mhm.
I'm guessing that the court would probably say, yeah, family member, parent. Is,
Mhm.
is that true, you think, or in your experience?
So custody is an interesting thing because there's custody in family court, there's custody in probate court, which is guardianship, and then there's custody in juvenile court, which can also be guardianship or CPS custody. And the rules are different in each of these courts. So and then the other first question is, what is the legal status of the parents? Now, you can be a biological parent without any legal standing. Now, if that's the case, if you're a biological parent whose legal rights have never been established, then you don't have rights that are superior to anyone else.
I
So,
didn't realize there's different levels of, a biological parent with no standing.
right. So, I mean, you could be a biological father whose paternity has never been established. You're not on the birth
Okay.
certificate. You've never filed anything in court. You have no legal rights at that point.
Yeah. So here's what I tell people in that situation when they have 100% and they're like, I want to make sure that my kids don't end up in the hands of this person. What I tell people, and I've heard this from other estate planning professionals, um, is that I have them write a letter, where they're speaking from the grave essentially, you know, and saying why that person should not be the guardian of their children. And then we seal that letter and we put it in with their will. And then so it's to be sent to the judge at that point.
Yeah, so I love that because um let's just play the situation out. Let's pretend we've got a hypothetical. We've got a mom with 100% custody. Dad's legal rights have been established, but he's a drug addict or he's in jail. He doesn't have any parenting time with the children. Mom dies. Grandparents come in and they say, we want to take custody. What do the grandparents do? Well, they need to choose a jurisdiction first. Are you going to ask for third party custody in family court or in probate court for a guardianship? And so we can help you figure out what's best. If you have stood in loco parentis, meaning you have been like a parent to the children, then we can go to family court and ask that you be given emergency custody.
Local parentis.
In loco parentis,
I
yes.
like it.
We can ask that you be given custody, and you probably will be given custody at that time. But let's say dad
That's
comes into
probably very common though, right? That in local parentis, where there's mothers and fathers who aren't necessarily the biological um, mothers and fathers, but they're assume that title or
right. There are a lot of people who stand in loco parentis. It can be grandparents, it can be aunts, it can be friends. Um, and once you've established that role and you've stood in loco parentis, then you can ask for custody in family court. And that letter would be evidence in a custody case as to the wishes of the mom who's now dead, as to why her parents should have custody.
yeah, and then also it should say in her will, I name my parents, who she
Mm-hmm.
wants it to be,
Mm-hmm.
and then some evidence of who it should not be, why it should not be the parent.
So when a parent names a guardian in a will, let's say both parents are married, they name a guardian, they pass. Does the will create an automatic guardianship?
Good question. So I have a lot of clients where they're all their family is out of the country. So the people that they want as their guardians are out of the country. So I have a lot of I've had a lot of first responder clients, and what I love about my job is I get to interview everyone that I'm meeting. I get to ask them about their job and see how it works. But in order to get a better answer to that question, I asked a lot of the first responders, what would you do? So in California, so I'm licensed in California and Nevada, and it's kind of nice to compare the laws. Although sometimes I get fuzzy on which state is exactly which, but California, they have a statute for a short-term guardian.
Mm.
So California law says you can name someone to serve as a short-term guardian.
Mm-hmm.
Arizona, we don't have that actual statute,
Mm.
but I've copied the same process.
Okay.
So I have people where, if all their family members are out of the country, I say, you should think about a short-term guardian, someone that they can go to immediately, before the other people can either get here, if that's what you want,
Mm-hmm.
or if they can arrange for them to go, to the other country,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes that's their wishes.
So, so if parents are married, they're here in Arizona, they both die in a car crash, or we play out, Frozen, and their boat sinks. Um, and Anna and Elsa's parents have written down that their parents are going to be guardians, can those grandparents immediately take custody of Anna and Elsa and do whatever they need to do to take care of them?
So here's what I've heard from the first responders, because the law left me, it didn't have a complete way, where we could do it. But from what I've been told by the first responders, is that they're usually looking for a family member.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's kind of the last resort to put them in the state
Right.
system. So they're looking like they're looking for a family member, or they said, I showed them my short-term guardian, kind of explained, how it works in California. And basically what they've told me is that if there's something that looks official, what the instructions are, they would follow that.
Okay. So the grandparents probably need to file some documents in probate court, but until they do, they can use the will probably to do what they need to do.
Right. That's my answer. Probably use the will, to name the guardians, that shows that they're the guardians. And then if it's a situation where, your real guardians are out of the country or out of state, you can consider a short term, a neighbor or someone local.
And do you practice in probate court as well?
Yeah. So we do some like litigated cases.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So been doing more of those lately.
So for minor guardianships, I wonder often if somebody's better off in probate court with a guardianship or with custody from family court. Do you have any
I don't
ideas
do
on that?
guardianships though. And I didn't realize the difference. That you got me thinking about that question. As far as if family law is easier. Now, sometimes it'll come up where if the beneficiary of an estate is a minor,
Mm-hmm,
we have to get a guardian appointed,
mm-hmm,
so that they can collect their interests of the estate.
mm-hmm,
But I don't do that work. I have someone else do it.
mm-hmm,
And I think they usually do it through the probate court.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
I wonder that. I wonder if it is easier through the family law court.
Right. And then of course you have the ability to adopt. And if you adopt, then you're in juvenile court.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And the juvenile court has jurisdiction over all the terminations and all the adoptions.
But isn't that really hard to adopt, or it takes time to get you into that type of court? Or is that an option for grandparents or a guardian?
What I would think, if both parents have died and the will is in place and gives guardianship to the grandparents and the grandparents want to adopt, I would first probably get guardianship, get a temporary guardianship through probate court, and then initiate adoption proceedings in juvenile court.
Yeah. So adoption, I know how it affects inheritance,
Mm-hmm.
but what would be the other advantages of adoption? I guess I'm trying to think. If they had money for that child, they would still have a conservator, someone that manages the money on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if an adoption would change that. If they were adopted as a parent, then maybe you could end the guardianship. So you don't have to check in every year
Right.
and
The
do the
guardianship would be
accounting and
done and you would be permanent parents. So guardianships can be terminated or they can be temporary, and you would be an orphan without any parents. And if you're adopted, then you have all of the legal rights of parents.
yeah, so that could be some reasons why the adoption might be a way to go. I have a case. I don't remember if I do. They all get mixed together. I don't know if it got settled or not, but I think we're doing one where there's a minor beneficiary, and we're going to ask the probate court if they'll put their share into a trust
Mm-hmm.
instead of giving it to them immediately, or really instead of doing a guardianship,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
would be the other way.
Yeah.
So I've heard of people doing it. I've just never personally done it.
I think what this conversation really tells me is that planning is probably even more important um, when you're divorced than maybe even when you're together, because there's a lot of room for conflict when you've got two sets of family that are no longer aligned. So now you've got competing grandparents, you've got competing interests, you've got both sides of the family that want to make sure that they protect their time with their children. And having some sort of documents in place to determine what's going to happen is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's why I show people how they can do just, I call it an insurance policy, like right away, just do something so they can sleep at
Mhm,
night, so they're not,
mhm, mhm.
stressing over it.
Yeah.
And then we can look, deeper in those other things.
Mhm.
But, but, some people, they don't know at what point they should see the estate planning attorney, right? Some people they want to wait until the divorce is all the way finalized. I would say it's a good idea that your family law attorney knows about the estate planning attorney, right? And that you have
Right.
a good estate planning attorney who's not going to move around assets. They know, they have a general understanding of the family law process. But I think it's a good idea to see an estate attorney right in the beginning,
Mhm,
to get your new plan set up. You
mhm,
can't fund it yet. You can't put assets into it, but
mhm,
at least when the divorce is complete and you're awarded, your property, you have a place to put it.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Because
And would a pour over will, put those assets immediately into the trust?
no, upon your death, and it takes
Mhm,
a probate.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
So the will, if you just write it out, that just says where your stuff goes,
Mhm.
but it would take a probate to transfer it.
Got it.
So
Okay.
you could write out the will right away, set up a trust with an attorney, so it's all ready to go, and then after the divorce is complete, move assets in. I see a lot of family law attorneys get lazy, or I don't know what happens, but assets don't get moved,
Right.
right? They have the divorce decree. I don't know how many times I've seen that. I got divorced 30 years ago, but we never transferred it.
Right.
It's still titled in their name.
Right. It's an interesting point you bring up. So we have a closing meeting after every divorce decree with every client, and we go over, hey, you're not done. Here's what you have to do now. Here are the changes you have to make. But many times people are so emotionally exhausted and financially tapped out, they don't really want to jump through the hoops to either change their name back or change the title of assets. Um, and so it can be really hard if people don't take the time to change the title of the assets and move the money out of the old trust into the new trust. It can really create a problem, right?
Yeah. So that's why I recommend that they do it, in the beginning, because yeah, you're gonna be tired by the time the divorce is over.
Right.
Right? Is that a requirement to end it? Huh? Both sides have to be exhausted
Oh, they're
and just
exhausted.
sick of
Yes.
it.
hmm
They both feel like they're getting ripped off,
You
and
know.
then you're there.
And so that is a fantastic transition to talking about you and your post-divorce parenting, your modern divorce story. So tell us a little bit about that, Rylas.
Yeah. So I saw your email about your podcast, and I said, what are we talking about today?
hmm
I'm on that side as well. I can identify with the single parents, and we're talking about Thanksgiving this weekend. And I said, now we're at the point, for better or for worse, that we don't really follow our set schedule.
hmm
And it's nice in a lot of ways because it's just like, hey, whatever's best for the kids.
hmm
I've been divorced, I don't know, it's been like 7 or so years, six,
hmm
7. It's been a while. And I would say I wish we were at that place sooner,
hmm
but you can't really force it, right? It's kind of like, I would say kind of the risk of not following the schedule is then you don't have the schedule to protect you,
Right.
right? If we're when we were following the schedule with all the holidays and everything, it was clear like who's doing what, um, or at least you had the schedule and people would try to argue it or whatever. But when it goes out the window, it's I don't know, easier in some ways, but it's a risk in the other way. I'll say.
Well, you can always fall back on the court order. Always. Even if you decide not to follow it, even if the two of you haven't been following it for years. If you say, "Hey, I haven't seen the kids for Thanksgiving in 3 years. It's my year. I want to have them. You can always do that. But I think practically it gets pretty hard, right?
Yeah, so yeah, you can always fall back on it, but if what you're giving up, and then later if what you're asking for is not according to the agreement, there's
Mhm.
no guarantees.
Right, right.
You can't
And
say,
so
well, I did this for you that time.
right. How
So
did you transition from we follow the parenting plan to we are going to parent in a more relaxed way or in a different way from the parenting plan?
um I guess I would say just not following traditional holidays more. And like I just look I like if I don't want to do the family stuff, I'm like, hey, I'll ask my kid's mom, like, hey, do you want to go do the family activities? It's cool if you want to take them to all those, because I don't really want to do it. And
Mhm.
it's kind of vice versa. Just what's best for the kids type of a thing
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
is the goal, hopefully.
Mhm. So how often do the two of you have to discuss what your schedule is going to be?
Um really, I would just say, so my schedule, I have like every other weekends and then a night a week. So really, just when it comes down to when my weekend falls on a holiday schedule, or just holidays,
Mhm.
so this is my weekend coming up. It's my scheduled weekend, but it's a holiday weekend, and I don't even remember who gets Thanksgiving as their holiday this year. And I think our plan splits it, is what it does, kind of like the
Mhm.
first part of it and the second part of it. So I'll just figure it out with her, like what she wants to do, and just I guess just be flexible.
Mhm.
I guess in order to get rid of the plan,
Mhm.
in my mind, I just have to be more flexible.
Mhm.
It's kind of
Mhm.
like throw out control is
Mhm.
what it is. It's like, all right, if I go this way, I know that I don't have the plan to protect me,
Mhm.
unless it's actually right in there.
Yeah. And so what are the advantages to you and to your kids, specifically of not following the plan?
I think we're just going to do more of what we want, right?
Mhm.
We're not tied to the plan. We're not planning around what it says. It's
Mhm.
hey, I want to go on vacation this time. Can I take the kids this time?
Right. And you never have conflicts?
It's been knock on wood, for the most part. I guess I don't really do a whole lot. Like I said, the traditional family activities, that was a lot of the conflicts. When you're
Mm.
splitting holidays, things fall like at a prime time. Like where are you going to be Christmas morning or Christmas evening. But I guess I'm just more flexible. I'm not as concerned about that, and I'm not trying to take them to like my parents and my brothers, like take them to a bunch of different places.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and like last week, it wasn't my weekend, but my kids called me and they asked if I wanted to take them to the skate park, and that's usually a pretty easy answer for me. I don't I like going to the skate
You
park.
like the skate park?
Yeah, so
What's your favorite skate park?
uh, we live close to. I live right in between two really good ones: the Tempe one and then the Scottsdale one, the Wedge at Scottsdale.
Nice. Well, that
So
must be fun for them.
yeah, it's fun for them, and it's fun for me to live my glory days. We used to rollerblade at the Wedge way back in the day, like when I was in
Nice.
before there was a skate park there.
Do you skateboard with them or rollerblade?
No, I don't. I just watch now. I um I broke too many bones.
Yeah.
Like in my mind, I think I'm 18, but my body's like, no, you sit behind a desk.
You're
So
not. You're not 18.
after I broke my femur, I gave it up, but not before I broke my ankle, my best of my shoulder. Like, but after about the third thing, I was like, okay,
That
I'll
seems
just
reasonable.
watch.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So most of the time, we as divorce attorneys recommend if you're going to change your parenting plan to get a stipulated agreement to the change of parenting plan. But what you're talking about is really a lot of little changes, being flexible on an ongoing basis. And when that's the case, you don't really need to change your plan. You just need to continue communicating. And it sounds like you guys have really figured that out.
Yeah, and I would say it probably depends on the people a lot, right? You know, like how your ex-partner works.
Hmm.
You know, because in some ways you're like more connected once you get divorced because you have to you know, deal on certain issues. But you know, maybe I just know her personality. You know, she doesn't like the set plans as much. You know, so even when I had that, it was hard. You know, following it all the time.
Hmm.
So you know, it may cause other people trouble. You know, if their partner is really dependent on the schedule, you know,
Right.
then it's going to be hard to try to change it.
Hmm. Well, Rylas, thank you so much for coming on today. How can people contact you if they need some estate planning?
For estate planning, our website is danalegalhelp.com. So that's the best way. So Arizona, California. Yeah, so if you're in the beginning part of your divorce, we can talk about, you know, some, you know, an insurance policy you can do right away, how you can get, you know, your plan ready. And then we'll make sure at the end, you know, so when your divorce is completed, you can get it all wrapped up. You know, finish wrapping up your divorce by having a new place to put the assets.
And you can help people transfer those assets?
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Good. Okay.
So
One last question. This is something that I'm going to start doing with every single guest. What was the biggest thing that you learned from your divorce?
the biggest thing I learned, I would say I learned a lot about myself. I learned I'm an asshole. No,
Oh,
but I guess just you know, there's a lot of things you learn, but I guess the biggest thing I learned is how to be better myself,
okay.
and um, and I think you know the kind of the further I got away from it, you know, I could see what were you know I guess problems in our relationship was maybe you know were you know, kind of different expectations, but I guess I learned more about myself is what I would say.
Became more self-aware and saw yourself maybe a little differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I think that that happens to every single one of us is well, it should. If it doesn't, if we're not more self-aware after a divorce, we've missed an opportunity.
Yeah, because I've had people. I think it's I don't get asked very often. They say, "Well, why did you get divorced?"
Hmm.
You know, like you know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I thought I could cite one or two things, but
Right.
now I would say like you know, we're different people. You know, we grew up, we grew like we kind of you know, goals in life changed, and we're just um, no longer compatible.
Right. Right. The reason is if you can say the reason in 10 seconds, I don't know that you've done enough processing.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I would say I've learned with more time. You know, it's not really, you know, one reason. It's kind of I think just kind of that bigger thing, you know. I guess as you change and grow up, you know, sometimes, you know, goals are different and you're I guess no longer aligned in life anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. The
So
soundbite rarely actually captures the complexity of relationships, which are complicated.
yeah, 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 definitely.
It's good
So
stuff. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rylas. And we will put your contact information in the show notes so that people will know where they can find you.
well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I'll
Bye.
see you later. Bye.